Hey Brick Bloggeteers, Will here, and today we're looking at set 21358, LEGO Ideas Minifigure Vending Machine. Now this retails for $179.99. And at the first glance, people are like, whoa, that's expensive, because I know that's how I was. However, this is a pretty decently sized set. It stands at about a foot tall, 7 inches wide, with about 9 inches deep because you have this extra little dispenser. And it has the working elements. You do get 2 coins, and the way these coins are built, one side's a 2x2 tile, and the other side's a 2x2 inverted tile. So you actually have a very smooth coin, no matter how you hold it. I really wanted to see how this thing worked, and I was surprised how simple it was. So there are a number of things I do want to talk about. The first thing is, because you're moving prize balls in a machine, there is essentially a ball contraption element to this. And one of the great ways to design is to create a path for your ball to move along. That lets you visualize and see where things are going, and they did that and left it inside the machine. However, you're not going to be seeing that from this finished product. Fortunately, I did a little clip of how it looks when you actually are able to see the path. So let's take a look at that. All right, we're at the end of bag 3, and before we get to all the gearing, I do want to point out something that's pretty interesting. All the black that you see, the black tiling and the black slopes that go down, is a good way to show pathing. So whenever you're creating a marble device or any device that'll move things around, having that black is a great visual representation so that when things are in motion, you can see whether or not they're moving correctly. Because if they're not, then all of a sudden you're seeing the path and you're like, uh-oh, things aren't following. Another cute element is in here in the shadows on the tray, there is a little divot, and that will help catch and center the prize bubbles once they get down there, to basically take off some of the force that goes into everything as it falls in. So that's just good design. So you know where you're going, basically mapping things out. But now we're talking about the working mechanism. So the working mechanism does involve you having to put a coin into the machine, because otherwise you can't turn it left or right. Turning it would be counterclockwise is prevented by a gear that's located in there with a little Technic T connector that jams up into the gears when you turn it the wrong way. However, turning it the correct way is stopped by a latch. So this, you can actually see it working. If I put the coin in, the prize comes out, the coin is returned from the coin return, and you get the prize bubble. However, seeing that latch in action is a little hard here. So let's go back to a new clip I did where I was just looking at the latch and how it releases when you insert a coin. Okay, here we are at the end of bag 4, I believe. And I wanted to show how the whole mechanism works by putting in the coin and what basically makes it work. So essentially the handle for the crank is going to be at the front, and it's pretty much a straight line all the way back to the center area that will trigger the fan that pushes the balls into the mechanism. So the way the coin part works is the fact that you need a stop. And the way they did that is they built a cradle for the coin. It's on a 6x6 round plate in the front here, and they made a little slot for the coin. Now, right in here is a latch. This is movable, and it'll push up against a rubber element inside the mechanism. This is the entire reason why the coin actually works. What happens is you push the coin in, it pushes the latch up, thus releasing this circle cradle, allowing it to turn. You do have a lot of mechanisms underneath here. There's a actual gear in here that has a Technic T-joiner that's pressed up against the gears, so it will turn the correct way, but if you try to turn it the opposite way, it'll lock up. So that's why you can't turn it the wrong way. However, once that's out of the way, that starts moving, and you can even hear the clicking. And once we get to the cradle in the right position, the latch gets pushed back down into place, locking it up. So if we add in the elements to further determine how the coin spot goes, not to get too excited. This will force the coin to be in the right spot to thus push the latch, releasing it so that we can turn it in the correct direction. Okay, that was surprisingly simple. You put a coin in, it just moves the latch out of the way, and that's essentially it, because the coin slot where it slots in is the giant 6x6 plate that everything's built on, and that's what gets stopped. So that was incredibly simple. As for how the ball is moved around, that has a sort of like Pac-Man style round element that's built. It falls into the mouth of that space, then it's moved around the path, which then is finally dropped into the slot. That's hard to see in the brick built, but let's go to the clip where we see how that shape helps move the balls around. All right, let's look at the last working element of the vending machine. So as you can see, you have this sort of Pac-Man shape element here that's going to allow you to slot in a prize bubble. And when it operates, it'll turn until it gets to the drop chute. Now the second part of this is the fact that you can't have multiple prize bubbles dropping, so you have a frame. And the frame will go over this particular element. So that whenever the prize bubble comes around, instead of falling continuously in, this will block up so no more pops out. Now the final element of the machine is in the centerpiece, which can actually be seen. It's this shaft that goes in the middle. Now along the shaft you do have a number of cams with some rubber elements that basically stirs the balls around so that whenever one drops out, it's also stirring up the prizes that are inside so that it essentially gets you to have a ball that will drop into the open mouth element, which is on the left side of the machine if you're looking at it. And there are slopes that lead down into that section to basically encourage that. You can get to a point where you slowly empty everything out and you might get one stuck in the back left. At that point, you just pick up the machine, shake it till it works. But for the most part, it will empty out the machine fairly consistently just by continuously entering the coins and pulling out the prizes. All right, fantastic mechanism. It's very understated in its design. Basically reds and grays and clear elements. In fact, the most colorful thing are the prizes with the half and half color ball and clear with the minifigures on the inside. The lid itself is pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Looks like a prize machine lid. But the price. So Is this worth $180? I initially saw it, I go, no, that can't be worth it. However, you do get a full set of 16 minifigures with their accessories. There are some duplicate minifigures, like for example, the teal spaceman, the gold spaceman. However, each of those have different accessories, so they are technically different characters. You get the same thing with some of the octopus knights, where one has a whip, where one has a sword, and one's a lady, one's a guy. They'll do small changes to make sure that in the end, there are 16 different characters in here. So if you're basing it off of that, I mean, a minifigure series, each one normally costs $4.99, so that's like 80 bucks just for 16 minifigures. And given the fact that you'll pay $300 for a set that might have 12 minifigures, this is a lot of minifigures for its price point. That means the machine itself, is it worth 100 bucks? Absolutely. These new elements for what makes up the clear area where you can see through, those are brand new. They're 90-degree angles. You get 8 of those. Also, all the prize bubbles, that's a completely new element. And then some of the other elements that are in like red and the slopes, you get so many of them, which is what you want to see in a good parts pack. So honestly, I was very, very impressed with the price for value when it was all said and done. Yeah, it does seem high, but that's because so many of the Lego sets now are high. I would easily buy another copy of this purely for investment purposes, because I know those minifigures will go, and it's a great build. So I really, really recommend set 21358 minifigure vending machine.